That the actress Diane Keaton has died at the age of 79. This is being reported by People magazine.
Do you know, when I was younger, I would pity myself if I wasn't with some man, I'm sure. But now I don't feel that way at all. I don't think I could ever fall in love the way I did when I was younger.
Because, you know, I lead with my personality, Diane's personality, and I feel like it's okay for me to have the run on, you know, in life, Diane. But you can't do that with what you do.
She never needed a wedding ring to feel complete. While Hollywood's most glamorous women chased fairy tale endings, Diane Keaton was busy rewriting the rules. Behind those oversized glasses and that nervous laugh was a woman who turned awkwardness into power and loneliness into choice. She wasn't just different, she was untouchable. She refused to become anyone's wife, muse, or mirror, even when the men she loved were legends. Al Pacino wanted freedom. Woody Allen wanted art. Warren Beatty wanted attention. But Diane, she wanted herself. For decades, people called her eccentric, unpredictable, even afraid of love. But the truth is far more complicated. What really drove Diane Keaton to walk away from every man who promised forever, yet never from the one person she could always trust, herself? She was born Diane Hall in Los Angeles in 1946, in a world that already seemed to know exactly what women were supposed to be: quiet, pretty, obedient. Her father, a disciplined real estate broker, ran the household with logic. Her mother, Dorothy, was the opposite, a dreamer who once tasted fame when she was crowned Mrs. Los Angeles. That title should have been the beginning of something, but it was the end. After the applause faded, Dorothy returned home to bake casseroles and raise 4 kids while her own ambitions gathered dust. For young Diane, watching her mother's sparkle dim was a quiet horror. She adored her, but she also feared that this was what love did to women. It made them small. The lessons sank deep. Marriage wasn't always a promise. Sometimes it was a cage with nice curtains. So even before Hollywood, before the fame, Diane made a silent vow that she would never disappear into someone else's story. In school, she was the tall, awkward girl with a voice too loud and a laugh too strange. But she found magic in pretending. School plays, community theater, anywhere she could vanish and still be seen. Acting wasn't about fame for her. It was survival. When she moved to New York after college, she arrived with more curiosity than confidence, clutching a dream and a cheap suitcase. She enrolled in acting classes, worked as a waitress, and faced the kind of rejection that breaks most people. But rejection didn't scare her. Conformity did. When she tried to register with the Actors Union, she learned that another Diane Hall already existed. Most people would have picked a random stage name, but she chose her mother's maiden name, Keaton, a tribute and a warning. It was as if she was saying, "I'll honor her, but I won't repeat her life." That act of renaming wasn't branding, it was identity. Diane Keaton was born out of both love and rebellion. And even in those early days, she was already a contradiction. Shy but daring, insecure yet bold. She took small theater gigs, odd commercials, and auditions that went nowhere. But every no sharpened her independence. In 1968, when she was cast in the Broadway musical Hair, the show required the entire cast to appear nude in one scene. Every actor stripped down, except her. They even offered her more money to do it, but she stood her ground. It was just $50 extra, but that refusal was worth more than any paycheck. She wasn't going to sell vulnerability to earn approval. That single choice, made by a young actress no one knew yet, foreshadowed the woman she'd always be: defiant, unapologetic, and impossible to control. Diane wasn't interested in playing by anyone's rules, not even the unwritten ones. In a city obsessed with youth and seduction, she wore men's clothes, skipped the makeup, and walked through auditions like someone who had nothing to prove. People whispered that she was odd, but directors remembered her. There was something magnetic about her authenticity. It was messy, real, and unfiltered in a world that demanded polish. She wasn't trying to be different, she just refused to pretend. And soon, that quiet defiance would catch the attention of a man who would shape her career, challenge her heart, and test the very boundaries she had built to protect herself. But Diane Keaton didn't know it yet. All she knew was that she was never going to be anyone's background character. She was here to write her own script. When Diane Keaton met Woody Allen, she didn't just find a co-star, she found a mirror. He was quiet, neurotic, and brilliant. She was chaotic, curious, and strangely magnetic. Together, they created something no Hollywood formula could produce: truth wrapped in awkwardness. Their chemistry was electric, not because they fit, but because they didn't. He mumbled. She interrupted. He intellectualized. She laughed too loud. In a town built on illusions, they made imperfection look beautiful. Their connection started when she auditioned for Play It Again, Sam, a Broadway play Alan had written and starred in. Diane was taller than him, bolder, and utterly unpredictable. The producers hesitated. She didn't fit the role's image. Then she walked on stage, opened her mouth, and everyone forgot the rules. She wasn't acting. She was just being herself, and somehow that was revolutionary. That performance changed everything. She earned a Tony nomination and caught the attention of Hollywood. Soon she was cast in The Godfather, her first major film. It was a world of power and control, run by men who spoke in silence and violence. Diane's presence as Kay Adams wasn't loud, but it was haunting. She brought humanity to a story drenched in corruption. When the door closes on her at the end of The Godfather Part 2, it's not just Michael Corleone shutting her out. It's every woman who's ever been silenced. That moment turned Diane Keaton into a symbol of quiet rebellion. She didn't need explosions or speeches to make an impact. Her power was in restraint. But while The Godfather gave her credibility, Annie Hall gave her immortality. Woody Allen wrote the part with her in mind, even naming the character after her. Annie from Diane's nickname, and Hall from her real last name. She didn't just play Annie, she was Annie. The quirks, the nervous energy, the unexpected laughter, it was all real. When the movie hit theaters in 1977, audiences had never seen anything like it. Romantic comedies were supposed to be glossy, predictable love stories. Annie Hall was messy, philosophical, painfully honest, and at the center of it all was Diane Keaton, wearing baggy pants and a man's tie, redefining what femininity could look like. She didn't care about looking sexy. She cared about being real. When costume designers tried to dress her up, she ignored them and brought her own clothes. The hats, the vests, the oversized blazers, that was all Diane. It wasn't just style, it was armor. It told the world, I don't exist for your approval. Woody Allen initially resisted her wardrobe choices but eventually realized her instincts were the soul of the character. Annie Hall went on to win 4 Oscars, including Best Actress for Keaton. She was 31, and overnight she became Hollywood's most unconventional leading lady. But fame didn't fix what was broken inside. Behind the charm and laughter was a woman still figuring out who she was and why she always felt safest standing slightly apart. Success brought attention, but not peace. People called her eccentric, as if individuality was a flaw. Yet that eccentricity was exactly what made her unforgettable. She had redefined beauty without meaning to, and in doing so she changed how women saw themselves. But while the world saw a confident, carefree icon, Diane was quietly battling her own reflection, fighting insecurities, addiction, and the loneliness that came with living on her own terms. What the cameras didn't capture was the woman off stage, staring at the same question that haunted her entire life. Could she be loved without losing herself? Success made Diane Keaton a legend, but it also made her restless. The more people adored her, the more she questioned whether they truly saw her. She had become the symbol of independence, the woman who didn't need a man to complete her story. But off-screen, her love life told a different tale. After Annie Hall, she dated Warren Beatty, the most desirable man in Hollywood. He was charming, confident, and used to getting what he wanted. Diane, with her quirky energy, fascinated him. For a while, they were the industry's favorite contradiction, the perfectionist and the dreamer. But Beatty's world revolved around control, and Diane had spent her entire life running from cages. When she realized love with him meant shrinking herself, she walked away. It wouldn't be the last time she did. Then came Al Pacino. They met on the set of The Godfather, and while Michael Corleone was ruthless, Al was shy, complicated, and magnetic in a different way. Diane adored him. She once admitted that loving him was both thrilling and heartbreaking. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but off-screen it was even more intense. Passionate, unpredictable, and ultimately one-sided. She wanted commitment. He wanted space. The more she reached out, the further he drifted. When it finally ended, she was devastated. But instead of bitterness, Diane turned that pain into strength. I wanted marriage, and he wasn't ready, she'd later say. So I learned to be ready for myself. It was the moment she fully embraced the idea that being alone wasn't failure. It was freedom. Through all of this, Woody Allen remained the constant in her life. Their romance had faded, but their bond never did. They made more films together. Manhattan, Interiors, Love and Death. Each one a deeper reflection of their strange, enduring connection. When the world later turned on Woody after controversy erupted, Diane didn't abandon him. She didn't defend or condemn. She simply said she believed in the complexity of people. It was classic Diane. Loyal, nuanced, refusing to fit into the easy narrative everyone wanted. Critics called her naive, but those who knew her saw something else. A woman who understood that truth isn't always black and white. As the years passed, Hollywood's fascination with her only grew. She wasn't the ingenue anymore. She was the standard for authenticity. Directors loved her because she didn't act like a star. She arrived on set early, stayed late, and never complained. She was curious about everything: lighting, editing, camera angles. While others chased fame, she chased honesty. That's why audiences trusted her. When she laughed, it felt real. When she cried, it felt personal. Diane Keaton wasn't just performing characters. She was revealing pieces of herself. But behind every laugh there was a cost. Success had given her independence, but also isolation. The spotlight that once felt warm began to feel blinding. She'd built a fortress of confidence, but inside it, she was still that girl watching her mother fade into the background, still afraid that love meant losing herself. As she entered her 40s, Diane faced a choice that would define the rest of her life. Keep searching for someone to share her story with, or finally accept that her greatest love might be the life she built alone. As Diane Keaton's career soared, the world saw glamour and grace. But behind the perfection was a woman quietly fighting battles that no one could see. Beneath the signature hats and laughter was a storm of self-doubt. Hollywood adored her for being different, yet demanded that she stay flawless. To manage the pressure, she developed habits that slowly became prisons. At one point, she admitted to drinking nearly 25 bottles of wine a week. It wasn't about indulgence. It was about escape. The constant scrutiny, the expectation to be effortlessly brilliant, the whispers about her eccentricities. It all became too loud. Alcohol silenced the noise, for a while. Then there was the eating disorder, the secret she hid for years. Long before Hollywood began speaking about body image, Diane was living it alone. In her 20s, she'd been asked to lose 10 pounds for a role. What began as discipline turned into obsession. For 5 years, she battled bulimia, binging on entire cakes and then purging in silence. It wasn't about vanity, it was about control. In a world where everyone else decided her worth, it was the only thing she could decide for herself. When she finally broke the cycle, it wasn't through therapy or fame, it was through exhaustion. She was tired of performing even when the cameras were off. Still, she never let those struggles define her. Instead, she turned them into fuel. Acting became her therapy, and art her rebellion. Every role she chose carried a piece of her truth. Complex, imperfect, unapologetically human. Films like Looking for Mr. Goodbar and Baby Boom showed women caught between independence and loneliness, power and vulnerability. Echoes of Diane herself. But while the characters found resolution, Diane rarely did. She once joked that she was a mess who learned how to smile on cue. Yet that mess was what made her real, and audiences loved her for it. Off-screen, she filled her world with passions that didn't require applause. Photography, design, architecture. She collected memories the way others collected awards. She'd spend hours wandering Los Angeles with a camera, capturing light and shadows that most people overlooked. To her, beauty wasn't in perfection, it was in imperfection. The chipped walls, the crooked smiles, the unfinished stories. It was the same way she saw herself. Flawed, but worth remembering. As she grew older, she began to find peace not in romance, but in creation. She wrote, directed, and restored old homes, finding comfort in structure when emotions felt unpredictable. The Hollywood machine had taught her that everything fades: beauty, fame, love, but craftsmanship lasts. By her late 40s, the drinking had stopped, the obsession with food had loosened, and for the first time, she wasn't chasing approval, she was chasing clarity. Diane Keaton's real transformation didn't happen on screen. It happened in the silence between takes, in the decision to heal privately while the world watched publicly. She had survived the self-inflicted storms, but the question lingered. If she could rebuild her life, could she also rebuild the idea of love itself? And in her 50s, she found an answer that no Hollywood script could have written. By the time Diane Keaton turned 50, Hollywood had already written her off as the eternal single woman, the eccentric who'd never settle down. But Diane didn't see her life as a story missing a chapter. She saw it as one still being written, just without the traditional ending everyone expected. While others her age were balancing families and careers, she made a decision that stunned everyone. She adopted her first child, a daughter named Dexter, followed a few years later by her son Duke. No husband, no partner, just her. She once said motherhood was something she'd always wanted but never felt ready for, until she realized there's no such thing as ready. For a woman who'd spent her life running from the idea of belonging to someone, motherhood gave her a new kind of belonging, one that didn't require sacrifice. Raising children in her 50s was not easy. She wasn't the typical mom at school pickups or PTA meetings, but that didn't bother her. She had lived long enough to know that normal was overrated. Friends said she was fiercely protective, endlessly curious, and always juggling chaos with laughter. Her home wasn't about perfection, it was about warmth. There were art projects, messy kitchens, and jazz records playing in the background. It was her version of freedom. No scripts, no spotlight, just life unfolding in real time. For Diane, love no longer meant romance. It meant responsibility, patience, and presence. She'd finally built a family on her own terms, and that was enough. But even as she embraced motherhood, the world wouldn't let go of the question that had followed her for decades. Why never marry? Every interview circled back to it, as if a wedding ring were the ultimate validation of happiness. Diane answered with grace, sometimes with humor, sometimes with honesty. I just never found anyone who wanted what I wanted, she'd say. But the truth went deeper. Marriage, to her, represented compromise, the same compromise that dimmed her mother's light. Diane had spent her entire life preserving her individuality. She wasn't about to surrender it for tradition. She loved men, deeply and often. She adored their energy, their flaws, their brilliance. But she didn't need one to define her. That realization wasn't loneliness. It was liberation. Still, she wasn't immune to longing. Watching her children grow made her reflect on the roads not taken. There were nights when the house felt too quiet, moments when she wondered what it might have been like to share that silence with someone. But even in those moments, she didn't feel regret. She'd learned that love doesn't have to follow a rule book. It can exist in friendships, in art, in motherhood, even in solitude. She'd chosen a life that might not have fit society's mold, but it fit her. And as she entered her 60s, Diane Keaton stood as proof that independence doesn't mean isolation. It means courage. She had turned what others called missing out into a masterpiece of self-discovery. And that courage would carry her into the next chapter, where she'd redefine what aging, authenticity, and womanhood truly meant. By her 60s, Diane Keaton had long stopped trying to impress Hollywood. The same industry that once questioned her refusal to marry now celebrated her for never giving in. She had aged, yes, but she did it without apology. While others chased youth with surgery and reinvention, Diane leaned into reality. She let the wrinkles stay. She kept her silver hair. She wore what she loved: suits, hats, gloves, layers of personality instead of makeup. Each outfit felt like a statement. I'm not hiding, I'm evolving. That fearless authenticity turned her into a new kind of icon, one who made aging look not like decline, but like arrival. And she kept working. Something's Gotta Give, The First Wives Club, Book Club. Films that proved older women could still lead, still be funny, still be desired. Hollywood didn't know what to do with women past 40 until Diane showed them. She made it clear that confidence doesn't expire. Even next to actors decades younger, she radiated something stronger than beauty: self-possession. Fans admired how she seemed comfortable in her own contradictions. Glamorous but goofy, serious but spontaneous, polished yet unpredictable. It wasn't a performance, it was a philosophy. Diane Keaton had found power in imperfection, and audiences could feel it. Off-screen, she became even more unapologetically herself. She bought and restored historic homes across California, transforming architecture into art. She released photography books, designed interiors, and curated exhibitions, all reflections of her deep fascination with life's details. Where others saw cracks, she saw character. Every chipped tile, every uneven beam was proof that something had lived, endured, mattered. That was how she saw people too. It's why she stood by Woody Allen even when his controversies made headlines. She didn't excuse him. She simply believed that loyalty and judgment aren't the same thing. To Diane, relationships weren't about perfection. They were about presence. As her fame matured, her sense of humor became sharper, her interviews more candid. She poked fun at her quirks, at Hollywood's obsession with image, even at her own contradictions. She joked that she was the last virgin in Los Angeles and laughed at her reputation as the eternal single woman. But behind the laughter was a quiet truth. She had built a life so full that she didn't have to apologize for its shape. The independence that once seemed lonely now looked enviable. She'd lived, loved, created, raised children, and stayed completely herself through all of it. When she appeared at award shows in her 70s, audiences didn't see just an actress. They saw a legacy. A woman who had aged on her own terms, defied the system, and still managed to charm it. She proved that rebellion doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to become invisible. And for Diane Keaton, that refusal was her greatest masterpiece. She wasn't trying to inspire anyone, but she did, simply by being exactly who she was. By her 70s, Diane Keaton had become something larger than an actress. She was an idea, a living reminder that it's possible to be both vulnerable and unbreakable, eccentric and elegant, complicated yet complete. While the world aged around her, she seemed timeless, not because she resisted change, but because she embraced it. Her face told stories now, lines etched by laughter, loss, and survival, but instead of hiding them, she wore them proudly. Each wrinkle was proof that she had lived fully, fiercely, and without apology. In an industry that worships perfection, she was a walking rebellion. She didn't chase the spotlight, she carried it with her. Her career in later years became a love letter to the woman she had always been. Funny, self-aware, fearless. In Book Club, she played a widow rediscovering love, surrounded by women who refused to fade quietly into retirement. Audiences adored it not because of the romance, but because it felt real. There was truth in her delivery, in her laughter that cracked mid-sentence, in her eyes that had seen too much to fake innocence. Off-screen, she turned her focus inward, writing memoirs, producing, mentoring young artists. Her books, especially Then Again, offered rare glimpses into her private thoughts, reflections on her mother, her insecurities, her aging body, and the strange calm that comes with acceptance. She didn't sugarcoat anything, she simply told the truth, as she always had. Messy, funny, human. But her greatest legacy wasn't built on awards or box office numbers, it was in how she redefined womanhood itself. Diane Keaton showed generations that a woman's story doesn't end when the romance does. That independence isn't loneliness, that growing older doesn't mean disappearing, and that self-respect is the ultimate form of beauty. Young actresses now speak of her not just as a trailblazer, but as a blueprint, proof that you can have depth without being mysterious, power without aggression, femininity without submission. Her influence stretched far beyond cinema. She changed how women dressed, how they aged, and how they looked at themselves. Even today, Diane Keaton remains an enigma that feels familiar. She posts playful videos, sings along to old songs, and dances in her kitchen on social media. Completely unfiltered, delightfully herself. It's not a performance, it's an extension of the life she's always lived. Real, unscripted, perfectly imperfect. At 79, she stands as one of Hollywood's last true originals. Not because she tried to be different, but because she refused to be anyone else. Her story isn't about fame, love, or legacy. It's about freedom. And in a world where everyone's chasing something, Diane Keaton reminds us that the most powerful thing you can ever be is content. Diane Keaton's life has never been a fairy tale. It's been a masterclass in honesty. She didn't chase the perfect love story, the perfect family, or the perfect body. She chased truth. In a world that told women to shrink, she expanded. When they told her to be sexy, she chose to be smart. When they told her to settle down, she decided to stand tall. She's proof that fulfillment doesn't come from fitting in. It comes from finally feeling comfortable in your own skin. Every choice she made, whether it was refusing to strip for a role, walking away from the men she loved, or adopting children on her own, was a declaration that her value was never up for debate. And even now, decades after her first film, she continues to defy gravity in her own quiet way. She never became anyone's wife or someone's afterthought. She became her own legacy. Her story isn't just about acting or fame. It's about the courage to say no when the world expects you to say yes. To love deeply, but never lose yourself. To grow older without pretending you're young. Diane Keaton made awkwardness elegant, independence romantic, and aging powerful. She didn't live life chasing perfection. She lived it chasing authenticity. And that's why she'll always matter. In an industry built on illusion, she stayed real. That's the kind of beauty no camera can capture and no time can erase. So the next time someone calls you strange, stubborn, or difficult, remember Diane Keaton. Remember that it was those very words that built her empire. She didn't wait for permission to be extraordinary. She simply was. And maybe that's the greatest lesson she's left behind. Not to live like her, but to live like yourself. Because in the end, Diane Keaton didn't need a script to define her story. She wrote it with laughter, courage, and a refusal to apologize for any of it. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Every comment keeps these stories alive. Stories of legends who didn't just act but inspired us to live honestly, fearlessly, and completely on our own terms.